Okay, so in this video I'm going to continue with some of the validation things that we did from the last video. Let's see. Okay. So one thing that I want to do is validate the email, whether or not it's formatted correctly. And then I also want to check if the verification password matches. Okay, so let's see if that worked. So I expect to see that the email is incorrectly formatted and the passwords do not match. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Another thing that I want to add is, let's see, so another thing that I want to add is when you have a long form and you only had maybe one field that was incorrect, you don't want to mm, lose all the correct data, right? So right now, even if I put in a valid username, put in a valid email, but if the passwords don't match, then the page will refresh and I'll lose all that data. All the correct data will be gone. So, okay. So what I want to do is, for all the correct fields, I want to basically refill those inputs. But I don't want to fill in the passwords because that's sensitive information. So I want to basically put the username and the email back in if they were correct. Okay. So let's actually start by adding a prefill variable into our template. So just to see if this worked. So here I want to put the value as prefill.username. And then here I want to add the value as prefill.email. Okay. Okay. So because this route here doesn't pass a prefill variable, we can use the same trick from last time and say, okay, so actually instead of saying prefill, why don't we just say username and email. Okay, and then here we can say locals.username and locals.email, and then we don't have to change this route here, even though it doesn't have the username and email properties. So let's go ahead and see if that worked. Okay. Let's see, so we'll say Alan, and I'm going to make the password not match. Okay, so what I expect to happen now is when I hit sign up, it's going to tell me that the passwords don't match, and then but the username and the email will still be there. Okay, so that looks like that worked. One last problem here is that even if the email was incorrect, it'll still pre-fill that field, right? So here it says email is incorrectly formatted, but it didn't clear out this email field. So what I want to do is I want to check if the username field or the email field, I want to check if those are inside um, the errors object. Okay, so I'm gonna make my life a little bit easier and install underscore. Okay, and I want to say underscore dot any errors error and I'm matching this param property. Okay, I have this backwards. Okay, so I'm saying here if any of the errors came from the username field, then I want to set the prefill to basically an empty input. Otherwise, I want to prefill to the username. And I'll go ahead and do something similar for the email. Okay, and let's see if that worked. Oops. Okay, so I think that worked. So let's see, so Alan. Okay, so what I expect is to see that the email is not properly formatted. So this should be blank, but the username should still be there. Okay, that looks good. Okay, so the last thing that I want to do is if a user is creating a new username, then I don't want to let them take a username that somebody else has already created. So for that, what I'm going to have to do is create a custom validator. So if you go into the documentation here, you can see how to create a custom validator. So it goes into the options, of where we use the middleware here. Okay. So here we're going to add an options object, and it's going to have a custom validators property. And here, let's say is unique username. And this part is going to be a little bit tricky because this validator has to be asynchronous. So the reason is we're going to have to do a user.find1. So, okay, first we're given a username, and we need to check if the username is already in the database. So the way that I'm going to do that is to do a user.find1 and match on the username. And the problem is that this is going to be an asynchronous function. Right? So I want to know if the user is already, if there's a user match inside the database, that means that this username is already taken. So this validator should return false. So the way that this works is that you need to return a promise. Okay, so this is the way that you create a new promise. You say new promise and pass it a function that gets a resolve and a reject. And we'll move this code inside the body here. And I want to say if there's a user, then I want to reject the promise. And if there's not a user, then I want to resolve. Okay. So then let's go ahead and add the validation here. So here we can use the validator that we defined. This is unique username. Now that's going to be available to us. Here. And then the last change that we have to make is that the request.validationErrors has to be request.async validation errors. And you can see that here. Anytime you have asynchronous validators, you need to use this async validation errors instead. And this async validation errors is going to return a promise. So you need to use a then and a catch. Okay. But otherwise, this code is mostly the same. So we're going to move this code, which is the code for a valid form, into here. And then we'll move this code, which is for invalid forms, into here. Okay, and hopefully this should work. So I'm going to go ahead and create a user called John. Okay, so this should work. Okay, so we've created a new user named John, and then I want to go and try to create another new user also named John. And this should tell me that this username has already been taken. Okay, and I think that's all the validation that I wanted to do for this form. So we'll call that the end of this video.